Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the release of this first ever annual grocery report, which is as a result of the Grocery Industry Competition Act, or GICA as we commonly refer to it, that came into force just over a year ago. I'm Pierre van Heerden, the Grocery Commissioner, and it's great to have so many of you with us on the call today from across the grocery sector and also the media. Shortly, I'll be taking you through the picture of competition from the report and what it means for our next steps. I'll then open the floor to the media for some questions. But before I get into that, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who's been involved in this report, the team at the Commission, the major supermarkets, and others who have provided information and data to make this report possible. As context, I want to briefly recap on how we got here. This is a $25 billion sector, and it touches the lives and livelihoods of every New Zealander. Kiwi families rely on supermarkets every single day to stock their fridges and their pantries. Many Kiwi businesses, growers, producers, transport, logistics providers, and other suppliers of goods and services are part of making this industry tick every day. It is a large sector in New Zealand. It's just over a year since I took up my role as New Zealand's first Grocery Commissioner on the back of the GICA legislation. And this was as a result of the Commission's 2022 market study into groceries. This report is the first comprehensive picture of the state of competition in the grocery sector after that market study. The data in this report is from 2019 to 2023. This report is an important benchmark for us to measure our progress against in the future and to make sure that we are focusing the tools that are available to us so that it can have the biggest impact for Kiwi consumers. It is also important to recognize that many of the tools that the Commission has to improve competition in the sector have only come into effect progressively over the past year, so they won't all be showing the full impact that the new legislation is having or all the work that the Commission has underway at the moment. Some of the work that we've done over the past year, because I've been asked about this quite often, includes implementing and monitoring the wholesale regime, implementing the whole regime as we have got it, introducing a grocery supply code and supporting suppliers and supermarkets to follow it, the settling of historic land covenants case against Foodstuffs North Island, supporting compliance with a new unit pricing consumer standard, which became effective 3 days ago, the launch of an anonymous reporting tool to support whistleblowers in the industry, targeted engagement with major supermarkets and suppliers and stakeholders on issues ranging from pricing errors, refunds, and other questions. A number of investigations are also in progress at the moment under GICA, FDA, and the Commerce Act, and we're also busy with a Foodstuffs merger decision, which is due in October. So what did we find and what does the report tell us? I've always talked about the importance of long-term, enduring, sustainable change for the benefit of Kiwi consumers. But I also want to acknowledge that there are very big expectations for change and that they can't come soon enough for Kiwi consumers. So today, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This report paints a concerning picture. New Zealand's 25 billion grocery sector is not, there are a lot of red flags. It shows increasing retail margins for all 3 major supermarkets. It shows continued high levels of profitability, and it shows ongoing dominance of the industry by the major supermarkets. In short, this first annual grocery report doesn't show meaningful improvement in competition in the sector, and that is not a good sign for Kiwi consumers. They want to see competition that delivers choice, innovation, great service, and better value at the checkout. I do want to acknowledge the inflationary impact on household budgets and the cost of living pressures through the period that this report covers. Although competition hasn't increased across New Zealand, we are seeing some improvements in some geographical areas like Auckland. But overall, the story is that retail prices in the major supermarkets have been increasing faster than the prices they pay to their suppliers. This is despite major supermarkets claiming otherwise. Smaller suppliers are not yet getting the full protection to address the power imbalance of the major supermarket, as has been intended from the introduction of the supply code earlier this year. There are ongoing issues with incorrect or misleading prices and charges across all three major supermarkets. Some barriers to entry for new competitors have been reduced. This includes the likes of the outlaw of land covenants, but there are other barriers like land banking, securing consistent and reasonably priced supply of goods, regulations like the Resource Management Act, Overseas Investment Act, and local government planning requirements that remain as barriers for new supermarkets to expand and enter the New Zealand market. So what needs to happen now? This annual grocery report provides a clear evidence that we need stronger action. We want to see more competition and sustained pressure on the major supermarkets to deliver better outcomes for consumers. We've brought forward this annual report, and it's given us the evidence to continue to ramp up our actions and unlock more of our regulatory powers. We'll be targeting our attention on the things that will make a positive difference for consumers and nurture retail choice. We support the Fair Trading Act penalties needing more sting for retailers to deter pricing inaccuracies. Accurate and clear pricing is a consumer right and an expectation in a competitive market. But the annual report shows that there are continuing issues with pricing and promotions across the major supermarkets. We've spoken about this and made our expectations very clear to the supermarkets that things have to improve. The Commission will support the Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs review of the Fair Trading Act and the Commerce Act. Legislative change to the Fair Trading Act could lead to significantly higher penalties with more sting that can have an actual deterrent effect for breaches by retailers. However, we aren't waiting for these legislative changes to come into effect. We are putting in place a disclosure standard to make the major supermarkets report to the Commission on the rate and resolution of customer complaints. We've also indicated to them that they need better refund policies. We're also continuing with our fair trading investigations into the pricing and promotional practices of all three major supermarkets, and we expect this to be concluded by the end of this year. Fixing the supplier and retailer power imbalance is also an issue. As announced last month, we've brought forward a review of the supply code to more effectively address the ongoing power imbalance and lack of trust between suppliers and grocery retailers. We acted quickly after the code was only in place for 5 months. The revised code should be in place by the third quarter of 2025, if not sooner. A well-operating code will give suppliers more confidence to innovate and invest in more choice for consumers. The penalties for breaching this code could be significant. The maximum possible fine could be the highest of $3 million, the value of the commercial gain, or 3% of turnover. We also aim to enhance equal access to wholesale products to support more retailers to compete. The Commission will be moving with urgency to increase the uptake in the wholesale market. Total sales through the wholesale market at the moment offers between, and this is between July 2023 and June 2024, was approximately 7.4 million. Now, this represents only around 0.03% of total supermarket and grocery sales in New Zealand. This is really insignificant and not good enough. We want to grow the number of customers in the wholesale market to strengthen competition. The competitive pressure that smaller chains and independent dairies can put on the major supermarkets could increase if they can access wholesale supply to provide more products at prices that are more attractive to consumers. Larger supermarket players may view wholesale access as a springboard to grow their customers while they invest and build their own relationships with suppliers. So, firstly, the Commission is introducing a set of enforceable rules for wholesale providers. This will be in the form of a wholesale code aimed to address the issues raised in the annual grocery report. The maximum penalty for breaching the code could be up to $10 million, 3 times commercial gain, or 10% of turnover, whichever is the greatest. Secondly, we're also considering whether we need stronger tools to address issues in the wholesale market, like the ability to demand that major supermarkets charge the same price to wholesale customers as to their own stores. We can also set structures to ensure that suppliers supply an adequate range. The Commission can then recommend to the Minister to unlock these tools through a wholesale inquiry under Section 55 of GICA. I can announce that the terms of reference for this inquiry have been released today, so the inquiry will take place. Enabling easier access into the grocery market for a third entrant is really important. We believe that 3 major national supermarket networks would be significantly more competitive than 2, and that this is achievable in New Zealand. Our report points to regulatory hurdles and actions by existing major supermarkets, limiting the opportunities for new entrants. Important progress has been made to remove restrictive covenants, and we're now turning our attention to land banking, which could be a factor further reducing the number of sites available to retailers looking to enter or expand in the market. Now, land banking is when companies buy and hold onto properties without any specific plans for their development. There are over 100 properties currently being held by major supermarkets which are not being used for retail stores. We will be looking at whether these holdings are preventing competition, as we did with covenants. We'll be further investigating the potential impact of underutilized sites on competition in the grocery industry, and we'll report back on this by the end of this year. Compared to Australia, we also have planning regulations that slow down the development of new stores. This is due to additional costs or delays in consenting processes. This was also highlighted in our 2022 market study. The Commission will be engaging with potential new entrants and investors to better understand their view on how we can remove remaining barriers to enable a third entrant into our grocery sector. A third entrant can significantly change the market and increase competition. Before we finish, I'd like to just share this high-level timeline of the Commission's work in the grocery sector over the next few quarters. We are working at pace and using all the tools available to us, plus looking at how to unlock further tools. We are committed to making a difference in this sector. Finally, this annual report paints a concerning picture. It's also given us further evidence to continue to ramp up actions and unlock more of our regulatory powers. What we want is more competition and sustained pressure on the major supermarkets to deliver better outcomes for Kiwi consumers. You can find the full report along with a separate executive summary on the Commission's website. We've also shared the annual grocery report with the Minister and MB, and we'll be working with them through any next steps that they could take to help address some of the issues raised in this report and to support what the Commission can do to change the sector. That brings us to the end of the formal presentation, so I'm happy to take questions from the media on the call. And while the journalists are getting ready to submit their questions, I want to answer a question that's come up in my conversations with people who have been directly involved and been change catalysts in the regulatory reform of other major sectors in New Zealand, and that have seen the benefits of competition play out over time for the benefit of consumers. The question is about parallels between the grocery reform and other industry reforms, particularly telecommunications. Telecommunications is a very different sector, but what you see today is a very much improved and vastly changed sector from 25 years ago. The competitive market we now have with choice, quality of service, innovation, is the result of a telecommunications industry that has changed over time, along with the evolution of the regulation of the industry. The regulatory framework for telecommunications in New Zealand has been subject to significant change over time. Regulation has been adapted when it's become evident that a particular part of the regime is not working. The physical supply chain and footprint of the grocery industry is very different. We recognize that. It's also hugely complex. But the technological change, for instance, in fiber and mobile that took place under telecommunications, can show that a regime can keep pace with these changes. The changes and benefits for Kiwi consumers took time in telco, and the same will be in the grocery industry. But I'm confident that we're starting to see the signs of change, and that these will be meaningful and enduring and provide benefits to consumers if we focus our attention in the right areas and have the right tools in our hand. In terms of our powers, we're making sure that we're using all the regulatory tools that are available to us. And as I've said today, we will also be looking at how to unlock all of the powers under GICA and considering whether stronger tools are needed. I'll now hand back to our MC and open the floor to the media for their questions.
Thank you. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please type it into the Ask a Question box and hit Submit. Your first question comes from Jason Walls from NZME, who says, they may have misheard, but it sounded like you said there are 100 holdings that supermarkets have that they're not using for stores. Could you please elaborate on that? What are they currently being used for? Is it just a way for supermarkets to stop their competitors from buying stores near theirs?
Thank you very much for that question, Jason. It's a very important one. Now, at the moment, there are more than 100 properties that are being land banked. We are looking into the details of each one of those because some of them may be used for car parks, some of them for storage, but there are definitely others that could be used for supermarket expansion. And we want to ensure that we get all the details from the major supermarkets on all of their holdings. Some of these properties have been held for more than 20 years. So that gives you an indication of what we're looking at. We will be looking at that and we will report back by the end of this year on those properties, where they are and what has happened, what is happening to them.
Thank you. Your next question comes from Daniel Michael Brunskill from Interest.co.nz, who asks, what are some examples of the misleading pricing you cite in the report?
Thank you, Daniel. The pricing errors that have come up, Consumer NZ, as an example, provided us with numerous examples of these. They could be where something is advertised as 2 for 1, but then the price for those two is higher than the price if you bought them individually. They could just be that the stickers that are on, which I've experienced myself, and I'm sure many of you have, are just incorrect. So you see the price, you think that's a good price, get to the till and you get charged a totally different price. Now, when you raise it with the supermarkets, often they will just refund you on that, and then you pay the right price. We have said to them that's not good enough. We would like to see a regime where there's a full refund and that item is free to the consumer, because that will force the retailers to actually start taking this seriously. We need to get change here, and we need to get it quickly, because consumers are being ripped off by large millions of dollars every single year.
Thank you. Your next question comes from Tom Pullerstrecker from Stuff. Should Foodstuffs franchise owners, e.g. Foursquare owners, be free to source groceries from any supplier or rival wholesaler, for example Woolworths New Zealand, and set their own pricing without breaching their co-op contracts?
Thanks for that question, Tom. This is quite a complex issue with their contracts that they've got and their agreements in terms of their property, the banner and everything else with the Foodstuffs head office. It is something, though, that I believe we need to look at and need to see if that can change. There's also the further issue in there that some of them may want to leave the co-op and go with someone else. And we want to make sure that those restraints of trade don't hamper competition. So it is an important part of the puzzle. Now, as I've said many times before as well, there's no silver bullet to fix this industry. It's going to depend on a whole lot of different aspects all coming together. And that's why we're working on each one of these separately. And this item that you've mentioned, Tom, is an issue that needs to be looked at going forward.
Thank you. You have another question from Daniel Brunskill, who says, the report says you would expect to have seen margin compression in a competitive market. Can you talk about why that would be the case? Are other businesses generally experiencing tighter margins due to economic conditions?
I wouldn't put it down to economic conditions, Daniel. I'd put it down to competition. We need more competition in the sector. When you have more competition, margins will come down. We see it overseas when we compare to other major supermarket chains. Competition drives down prices, competition drives innovation, competition drives choice. So competition is the key that we are aiming to here. It's not one or two things that we want to achieve. The primary focus is competition, because the outcome of that will be better value at the supermarket, more innovation, and better choice for consumers.
Thank you. You have another question from Tom Pullerstrecker, who asks, should the rules surrounding the retailing of beer and wine be relaxed?
That's a very interesting one, Tom, and one really for the policy makers and the government to consider, because alcohol falls outside of my remit within GECA.
Thank you. You have a question from Jason Walls from NZME. What feedback have you got from the supermarket sector on this report? Have they indicated that they will cooperate?
The supermarkets, Jason, have been cooperative throughout, but the thing is, I don't want to see words, I want to see action. This report was only shared with them last night, so I haven't spoken to them specifically about the report, but most of the issues in the report are things that we've been raising with them throughout this past year. So for me, it's the words are one thing, and the words are good at the moment, but action is what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Once again, if you wish to ask a question via the webcast, please type it into the Ask a Question box. Your next question comes from Giles Beckford from Radio NZ. Are you willing to reconsider recommending action to physically break up supermarket structures, such as divesting wholesale operations or forced breakup of brands?
Morning, Giles, and thank you for that question. I'm sure it is something on everyone's minds. Structural change is something which is very big, but again, that comes down to the policymakers and the government to make a decision on that. What we are doing at the moment is we are unlocking and utilizing all of our tools. You would have seen that in the OECD report, they recommended that if all of our actions fail, then that would be a next step for the government to consider. So, at this point in time, we focused on really making sure that we're using every single power that's been given to us. We're doing that at speed and at pace, and you will see that in the way that we are bringing forward, for instance, the annual report. We've brought it forward by a year. We've brought the supply chain review in after only 5 months of operations. So what we're doing is we're using both the historical data in the report, but also what we're seeing on the ground. And that informs us of what we need to do, and we are doing all of that at pace.
Thank you. You have another question from Tom Puller-Strecker. When it completed its market study into the supermarket industry, it did not recommend a mandatory wholesaling regime. It is not suggesting it may need to be beefed up. Why has the Commission changed its mind?
What we want to do is we're using the current information available to us, and what we are seeing is that some of the smaller operators out there could do with better pricing and better range. There's been a large number of applicants for the wholesale regime, but the uptake has been low. And the reason for that is mostly the pricing. We want to ensure that that pricing gets corrected. There are issues within that wholesale regime as it is currently, with many of the rebates, the trade spend, or in other words, the amount that the suppliers put in for specials, those aren't passed on to the wholesale regime for the smaller operators. So what we're saying is that as an interim, at the moment, we can help these smaller operators to actually be more competitive and assist with us getting more competition in the market. The Auckland market is a good example where we've seen more competition come in, and those haven't been from a third entrant. They've basically been from other entrants into the market, like Costco, the Warehouse Group with their limited offer, Foodies that has just come in as well to the market. So that is why, Tom, we are looking at increasing our powers there to get a better deal for these smaller competitors to compete while we're waiting for a third entrant.
Thank you. Your next question is from Gregor Thompson from Business Desk. Woolworths reported a loss in FY24. They reported their profits fell 57%. Both figures contradict the report's findings. Can you please square this circle?
Yes, thank you very much, Gregor. The information that we have used in our report is directly sourced from the supermarkets. So we are using their own information, and we're looking at the margins. and we are taking out things like write-offs and extraordinary items and others. So even though it appears that there wasn't as much profit, we are looking at all of those, and all three major supermarkets have increased margins and either maintained or increased their profitability. So the information is directly sourced from the supermarkets.
Thank you. There are no further questions at this time. I'll now hand back to Pierre van Heerden for closing remarks.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us on the call today. I want to ensure that we are doing everything in our power and at pace to get change done in the industry. However, this does take time, as we've seen in the telecommunications industry. It's not something that gets fixed overnight. And that is why we are doing a range of things to ensure that smaller competitors that are currently in the market can compete better. But also the big one for us is what is needed for a third entrant to come into the market. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to a lot of you again going forward.